He is nowhere to be found, and I promise you, he is running another scam.
The stupidest thing we did was to trust that the bank was giving us accurate information.
They say the best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I need money. That's what I want. That's what I want. Yeah. That's what I want.
Hi there, I'm Tom Natchu. Welcome to another episode of Fraud Squad TV. Fraudsters, scam artists, swindlers, grifters, whatever you want to call them, they're all in it for the same thing. They want to take your money in any immoral and unscrupulous way they can. You see, there's no ethics in fraud. It's only about the money, whatever it takes. And I mean whatever it takes, even sometimes a life. It's not a small ticket item. Fraud is in the billions of dollars throughout North America, and it's increasing every day. Fraudsters have a desire to gain for themselves at any cost. So it's important that we all learn to protect ourselves and start fighting fraud together. Please stay tuned for this episode's stories and valuable tips. What percentage of thrift shops are run by actual charities? 15%, 30%, 45%, or 60%? Only 30% of thrift shops are run by actual charities. It's not always easy to tell the for-profit from the non-profit thrift stores. But if you're hoping your donation will be used to help those in need, take some time to investigate the store. Find out where the money really goes. Do you ever play the stock market? Well, maybe you make a career of it. Now, whether you're a Wall Street novice or a blue-chip expert, you can fall victim to a fraud known as pump and dump. This scam is so named because the fraudster will artificially pump up a stock's value with false claims, unrealistic projections, maybe even a couple of phony news stories, and then dump his share when the value is high. Unfortunately for you and all the other investors, the stock soon plummets and the investor's money is lost forever. Let's take a look.
I had a very good friend who was a stockbroker that had never tried to sell me any stock. And he called up one day and said that he had something I ought to buy, and I just did it.
Jakey Sandifer, the owner of Sandifer Oil and Gas, found out the hard way that if a stock rises in value from 83 cents to $20 a share in just a few months, it's not to be trusted. And he should never have trusted convicted felon and fugitive Harris Dempsey Butch Ballo.
Paid 83 cents a share. He called me in 4 months and said it's up to $4. And that he knew it was going to 10 or 20. Trusting him, I bought some more in a deal called Titan Industries.
Soon after Jakey and his partner stepped up their action, the stock began to fall. Now he's beginning to panic, and he called his good friend Butch with some questions.
He said the reason it was going down was that they were going to go on the NASDAQ, and that they hadn't gotten their paperwork in.
But there was no paperwork and no NASDAQ. All there was a couple of articles in the paper about the company and what they were up to. But that didn't seem good enough. Something wasn't sitting well.
My stockbroker came to see me one Sunday night and said that he thought that we had been had. So I go see a friend of mine with Baker Botts Law Firm, and we sued for fraud.
The trading price of the stock has been artificially inflated by innocent investors. The perpetrators and insiders on the fraud will sell into that higher inflated trading price, cash out, and make off with their profits, while the innocent investor is left holding large quantities of worthless stock.
In a landmark decision, the courts issued a judgment against Butch Blue, providing restitution to Jakey and his partner for the money they lost, plus $8 million in punitive damages. But the investigators soon learned that they were just scratching the surface.
We found out that he had a pump and dump scheme. There were people involved in Florida, La Jolla, California, Monroe, Louisiana, Kansas City, Houston. We got all this information, and when we got the $8 million punitive damage, we started, of course, that was enough to pursue it further. we contacted the FBI and the SEC and started criminal procedures.
Various calculations by different groups on what the scale of pump and dump stock frauds are in any typical year, but suffice it to say that it is a multi-billion-dollar business with multi-billion-dollar losses to basically innocent, unsavvy investors in any given year.
There was finally a judgment gotten against Butch Blue. He pleaded guilty. They dropped 11 charges. He pleaded guilty to 1.
Butch Blue was released prior to sentencing on $100,000 bail, $10,000 of which he quite willingly posted. Facing up to 10 years in prison and a $500,000 fine, Butch failed to appear in U.S. District Judge David Hittner's court for sentencing and remains a fugitive today.
Was quoted in a Houston paper as saying that he scammed half of the people in the U.S., and now he's conned the U.S. government.
Trying to capture the elusive Butch Blue has been a struggle for the FBI, the Securities Commission, and a lot of other agencies. To help, Jakey and his partner hired a private detective and spent more than $2 million of their own money. This story is not unique, sadly. People like you and me are often convinced to invest in stocks and bonds, both legitimate and bogus, by simple phone solicitations.
He is nowhere to be found, and I promise you, he is running another scam.
We're with our fraud expert, Craig Hannaford. I've got 2 questions, both in 2 parts. First of all, I invest whatever money I have and things start to take off. Should I be paranoid right away?
Well, not necessarily. As long as you've had good advice and you believe in the stockbroker and the stock, there's nothing wrong with making that type of investment. You know, that's how people make money. They can actually make some good money in the market. But what you have to be careful of is if you get advice from somebody you don't know about a stock you've never heard of.
Well, that's the second part of my first question. Now if things are taking off okay and I trust everything going well, how do I know when to get out?
Well, you know, these fraudsters are really good. If you get sucked into a pump and dump, that's the real issue, when to get out. Because the fraudster is working to pump the price up, and he's going to get out at the top. The best advice I have is don't get involved in these types of transactions in the first place. Generally, you'll be the loser.
Okay, now Jakey Sandefur is a smart guy, millionaire. You know, you'd think that he'd know better. Is this type of pump and dump fraud normally committed against guys who play the market all the time?
You know, there's no set pattern. I've seen victims who are very wealthy, and I've seen victims who couldn't afford to lose anything. You can't really say one person's smarter than the other. Victims come from all walks of life.
The second part of the second question, there's an element of greed here, isn't there?
Well, there is. I think everybody wants to make a good investment and feel that they're really smart, but it all goes back to your due diligence. Never invest in a stock that you don't know anything about, and keep watching your investments, and make sure that you know the person who is selling the stock to you.
He's got your attention, doesn't he? Stand by, he's got even more tips for this type of fraud.
Deal with a stockbroker you know and trust when making stock investments. Make sure you ask the stock salesperson where he's licensed, and then do some checks with the licensing agency. Don't fall for a high-pressure sales pitch to buy an unheard-of stock. Always do some independent research before you invest in any stock.
Don't go away, we'll be right back with more Fraud Squad TV.
What signs indicate an investment deal is not legitimate? You find it through a spam email message? The offer is pressured, time-sensitive. The investment is low risk with high return. It's such a hot tip, there's no time for documentation. Well, all of these are signs that the deal might not be legitimate. Fraudsters use high-pressure tactics to force you to make a quick decision with little or no information. When it comes to investing in anything, take the time to really understand the opportunity.
Have you ever sold something that you've used? A TV, stereo, an old sofa, sports memorabilia, or perhaps even a car? Well, most of the time, our biggest worry is that we'll be offered too little for the item we're selling. So how do you think that you would react if someone came along and offered to send you more than your asking price? It's called an advance fee fraud. It's also known as an overpayment fraud. And it's becoming more and more common by the day. They're the scams that involve sending you a check that's well over the amount of money that you're asking for an item or a service, and then simply and politely requesting that you send the difference back, or maybe even send the difference to someone else. So you send the money, the check comes back phony, and you're held responsible to the bank for the full amount. Those behind these schemes are taking every opportunity possible to scam you out of thousands of dollars. So let's take a look at this story.
Our first real clue that something was wrong was just about a week after we had deposited the check, the bank called us.
Shawn Mosh and her husband Jeff were just like any other North American couple with children. The two faced the typical financial responsibilities of parents: a house, the monthly bills, and the feeding and caring for their kids. And so when it came time to put money towards one of their cars, money they really didn't have, the two decided they'd be better off to sell the vehicle. And that is where this story begins.
It all started because we were selling my husband's 1961 Buick Special.
At that time, Shawn was a stay-at-home mom, so didn't really have the money to put into it, and it was kind of getting to that point where it needed some work, so I had to sell the car. I placed a few ads out on the internet to try and sell the car, and started getting lots of different emails from interested buyers, anywhere from, you know, the United States to Brazil. I got a email from a guy in Africa claiming to be an automobile dealer over there and was interested in my car. So sent emails back and forth, agreed on a price. One of the emails he sent me, he asked if one of his clients that was here in the United States could send me money, and that way it would expedite the purchase, because then he wouldn't have to go through a currency exchange, that kind of stuff. At that point, it sounded kind of fishy, so, you know, started kind of throwing the red flags up.
Shawn and Jeff felt skeptical about this particular buyer, but they did want to sell the car. So the two decided that they'd go ahead with the deal, but be extra vigilant along the way.
Sent an email back saying, okay, you know, that's fine, you know, it's like you can have the guy send the money, and didn't really expect that anything would ever come of it. But, you know, a couple days later, we got a check in the mail, a cashier's check from the Bank of America for $8,800. I was selling the car for $1,600, and the remainder was going to get wired back to the transport company. So Shawn and I had talked and said that we were going to ask the bank how much time that we needed to wait to know that the check was clear and good, so that way, you know, we weren't wiring any money before we knew for sure that, you know, we were covered and safe.
Often the victim is online selling a product, a car, a musical instrument. It's amazing what the bad guys will pick up on and lock into. Then they'll say, I'll buy it at your asking price. They send you a check. It's a certified check, and it looks really good. It looks good enough to get through the bank tellers.
I brought the check into the bank, and I asked them how long until this check would clear. And they said 24 hours. I said, now I want to know for sure, not just when the check is available, the money's in our account, when the check is actually good money that I can spend without having any worries of it coming back to hurt us. And they said 24 hours, ma'am, no problem.
Shawn and Jeff waited a day longer than what they were told by the bank. The two then confirmed with the bank that the funds had in fact cleared before they took out the money from their account.
So 48 hours later, I went back to the bank, and before I withdrew the money that was supposed to be the portion for the transportation of the car that we were supposed to wire to the shipper, I asked the person there at the bank, can you verify that this check has cleared? And they gave me the amount of the check and said the date it was deposited. I said, yes, that's the amount that I'm looking at. And they said, yes, it's in your account, it's cleared, it's good. I said, no, this is never going to come back and bite me in the butt. And they said, no worries at all.
And so it would seem that Shawn and Jeff took every precaution necessary before getting geared up for the sale of their car. But even now, they felt it was safe enough to put the wheels in motion. The two would find themselves on a very bumpy road with their bank.
The next day, Jeff went and wired that money. The entire time, we never trusted the scammer. We trusted our bank that they were giving us accurate information about how the procedure went for checking the checks, for the clearing process, and that they were giving us an honest answer when they said that it was verified and that everything was clear.
The bank has to allow that check to go completely through the process, and an assurance that it has cleared is something that the victim needs to get.
Our first real clue that something was wrong was just about a week after we had deposited the check, the bank called us and they said that the check that we had deposited for $8,800 came back as counterfeit.
I knew right away because I heard Sean cry. And she goes, no. And it's like, it was at that point that I could just feel it in my gut. It's just like, that check was bad and now we're gonna be responsible for it. So that was the point when I knew. It's like I could hear her crying, you know, it sinks in real fast.
At first, when we found out we were victims of the scam, immediately I felt shame and anger and blamed ourselves. How could we be so stupid? But yeah, that took about a day and that passed, and then I said the stupidest thing we did was to trust that the bank was giving us accurate information. Legally, all we can say is that both sides came to a agreeable settlement. When we did go looking for a new bank, the first thing I did when going into a new bank was ask them if I came in with a cashier's check for $8,800 and asked you how long it would take for this check to clear. The bank that told us that would take approximately 10 to 14 business days is the bank we made a new account with. The ones that told us 24 hours, we said, thank you and have a nice day.
Jeff and Sean learned the hard way about overpayment scams, but they weren't about to let their experience go to waste. The two started up a website called scamvictimsunited.com.
While we wish we could help people financially, we found that just being able to share your story kind of as a therapy support group online really does help people to get through this, knowing that there's somebody else out there that's gone through it and has survived and come back has really helped a lot of people to get the inner strength to say, I can get through this too.
I always look forward to the part where I get to ask a few more follow-up questions to Craig Hannaford. Okay, now I've deposited a check into my account. It's a foreign check, but if my bank allows me to draw funds against that check, doesn't it mean it's a good check?
Well, you know, that's something that confuses a lot of people, and that's not the case. The bank may allow you to withdraw funds like 5-7 days after the check goes in, but it could take 30 days or even longer for the bank to determine if it's a counterfeit check or some other fraudulent type of check. And they may come back and get that money back from you out of your account.
So, you know, we're going back almost to the Wild West where the only way to be sure is cold, hard cash. And come to think of it, didn't we do a show on how to counterfeit cash?
That's right.
So how do you know? You get a certified check, I guess.
Well, you know what? The safest thing is not to accept a check from a foreign bank. I mean, you can ask for a money order. You can tell the person to wire you money through Western Union or through the wire services, but you really got to be careful before you accept a foreign check. And then in this case, they were actually sending money back to the person down in the foreign country. I mean, that's a classic setup, Tom, and we have a lot of victims out there who fall for this scam.
I'm glad I asked the question, and I bet you've got some of your own. Craig's got a couple of more tips to make sure that this doesn't happen to you.
Always wait for a check to clear before sending merchandise. Never part with merchandise until you are absolutely sure the payment is good. Be very suspicious if someone tries to pay you with a check for more than the price agreed on, especially if they ask you to provide cash in return for the overage. It's better to wait for an honest buyer than to lose your money and what you are selling in exchange for a quick sale. Overly complex methods of payment are a big red flag that something is wrong. There are many ways for a buyer to make payment in a simple, secure manner. Wire transfer services and internet payment services all provide quick, easy, and safe ways for a buyer to pay you.
After these messages, more Fraud Squad TV.
How much money is lost due to check fraud every year? 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, or $10 billion? In North America, more than 500 million checks are forged annually, with losses totaling more than $10 billion. If you're involved in a transaction in which a check is used, wait for the check to clear before you send the merchandise.
Hi, I'm Naomi Joy. Has anyone ever told you that they have a great investment for you, one where there's no risk and you're guaranteed a huge return? If so, I hope you didn't give them any money, because it was probably a scam. Only a con artist will tell you that there is no risk in investing. Investing always has its share of risk. You have to determine how much you're comfortable with. A real financial advisor will explain all of this to you. So before you invest in anything, make sure you understand what's involved. Do you know the difference between stocks and bonds or margin accounts and mutual funds? If not, do your homework. Make sure your investments make you wealthy and not a fraudster. Now Fraud Squad TV takes it to the streets to hear about some of the other ways fraudsters have tried to take your money.
I signed up for a gym about this time February last year, and I knew something was fishy after a month, so I tried to get my money back around March, and they told me to come back in April. I was talking to some people, and they were taking money from people up until the day before the lease was up. Like, they're knowing that they were gonna cheat people out of their money. It made me sick. Like, it was horrible. Like I'm a student and stuff, and me, $450, maybe not a lot to other people, but you know, it was a lot to me, and I was screwed basically. Do your research, because if you're gonna put your money into something like that, you should really do your research first.
I had a situation where the bank called me, and they were basically letting me know there'd been some unusual transactions on my account. So I told them, you know, I didn't make those transactions. But nonetheless, the bank actually gave me a non-disclosure form, which I filled out, and I didn't have to pay for it. Just make sure you check your statements regularly for items and that you may not have purchased, and really make sure that you keep a close eye on your finances.
With respect to identity theft, my mother one time was using her credit card, and what happened was she noticed that someone else found the number and other information on the credit card. So what happened was the $100 or $200 was missing on the credit card statement she found online. She called the credit card company. She said, "I'm not paying for it," and then the company had to cover the I think it was $200. When you get a credit card, if you have one, check your statement regularly and make sure you know what's going on. Make sure that if there's any things that have been purchased with your name or with your credit card, make sure that they're your purchases and contact them immediately.
Thank you for sharing your stories. By telling us your stories, we just might prevent someone else from falling for the same scam. Now, if you want to learn more about protecting yourself from fraud, or if you have a story to share, visit our website at fraudsquadtv.com. Let's fight fraud together.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of Fraud Squad TV. If you're interested in this episode's stories, you can read more about them on our website. Or, we'd especially like it if you'd tell us a fraud that might have happened to you. All you have to do is go to fraudsquadtv.com. Remember, we're all in this fighting fraud together.
Hello, I'm Tom Natchu. In this episode of Fraud Squad, we're going to look at a fraud that involves something that many of us use just about every single day: our automobiles. Now, when you buy a used car, you don't expect that it will threaten the lives of you and your family, but unscrupulous auto shops will sell you a car that either has defective airbags or simply none at all. Now, victims of this fraud have been seriously injured in crashes, and as you'll learn tonight, some of them have even lost their lives. Now, you think it can't happen to you? Well, according to one estimate, as many as 1 in 25 used vehicles may not have properly functioning airbags, and one of them could be yours. But first, we're going to show you another type of vehicle fraud that can leave you financially ruined. There are dealers who will take your extremely expensive RV onto their lot and promise to sell it on consignment. Now, these unscrupulous dealers end up pocketing the money and leave you holding the bag. But as ever, there are ways to protect yourself and your family, and tonight, we're going to show you how.
In all the time I've been in business, and I've dealt with people on the other side of the world, the one guy that's beaten me lives 70 miles away from me.
I believe that there's probably over 100 victims that actually were affected by him.
There's a lot of money that he made, and I think greed is probably the biggest motivator here.
The amount of money that we're aware of that Mr. Earl defrauded people of was over $2 million.
85 charges of fraud over 5,000 and 9 counts of fraud under.
What I just, felt violated.
There is nothing like leaving everyday stresses behind and hitting the open road. The carefree life of RV traveling is being embraced by those seeking freedom and adventure. For many, those happy times became a nightmare they'd soon rather forget when Donald Earl, a cunning RV salesman, entered the picture.
Mr. Earl had a couple of different schemes, if you will. One of them was he would agree to sell your RV on consignment, and he would sign a consignment agreement with you. And in most cases, there was a written consignment agreement. So he would go to a local Ministry of Transportation office and pretend that he needed to get a new permit for a vehicle, and then under false pretenses would ask for one, pay the $10 or whatever the fee was to get one, and then convert the vehicle for his own purposes and not have any intention of paying the consumer the monies that they were owed for their vehicle.
I own a business. I had originally purchased a recreational vehicle to use as a mobile showroom.
We like to travel when we retired. One of our goals to get around and see, especially because we are immigrants and there are so many places in this big continent we haven't visited.
Point came where I wanted to sell it because of the type of vehicle it is. It's not you just go down to the local dealership and move it out.
It had a trailer that was about 9 years old, in good shape, except it had started to take in water through the roof. I found Mr. Earl's address through the yellow pages in the phone book and phoned them up and told them that I need some repair done on my trailer. And whether they would do that. Oh yes, sure, come on over. And I took the trailer over and had them look at that, and the first thing they said, do you want to sell it? If the price is right, I may consider it. Sell it at 10,000 or better, then I would go ahead and sell it. Sure, that should be easy.
Wheels started getting in motion, agreements were signed. They took possession of the vehicle physically. When they took possession of the vehicle to drive it up to the lot, he said, well, where's your ownership? Well, no, I'm keeping the ownership. Put it up on their lot, and as people went by, it was being shown to prospective customers.
On the traffic in there, potential buyers, and the amount of merchandise, it looked as if it was 100% solid. So I never thought this could be a dubious business. We drafted a contract in the amount of $10,000. So just leave it with us and we'll take good care of it.
I did inquire, he's phoned in a couple weeks, I'd phone in a couple weeks, and there seemed to be some people looking at it. And so anyways, there was an opportunity I had to travel past that location on other business. On the way back, I would drop in and take a look and see if it was there. Well, when I got there, the vehicle wasn't on the lot. You could smell that there was trouble.
How many recreational vehicles are estimated to be in North America? A, 1 million, B, 8 million, C, 10 million, or D, 12 million? The correct answer is B. 1 in 12, or 8.3% of the vehicle-owning households, own an RV. This represents approximately 8.2 million households.
When I got there, the vehicle wasn't on the lot. You could smell that there was trouble. With that knowledge that it wasn't there, I went to one of the kiosks that the Department of Motor Vehicles has, and for $20 got a report that said that I didn't own it anymore.
Complaints started to come in about Mr. Earl and the Barrie RV sales. At the time, there was just a few complaints.
Nothing happened for a month or so until I started thinking, shouldn't they have sold it now, since they said it would be an easy sell? And therefore I phoned the company and they said, no, it hasn't been sold yet. I started hearing some rumors about something not being right out there.
It appeared that there was a wide-scale problem with this consignment sales. place.
Imagine your surprise when the vehicle you left at a dealer to sell is nowhere in sight. Customers visiting the lot can't find their trailers, and Mr. Earl is also hard to find. Willie convinced the receptionist to give him Donald Earl's cell phone number, but all he got was more lies.
He then said, oh yeah, the trailer had just been sold yesterday. I asked him whether then the secretary could go ahead and write us a check, which he said she couldn't, because according to the contract, they had 30 days to pay us back.
The facts I had in front of me indicated that there was a fraud. And as far as the government was concerned, as far as the Department of Motor Vehicles was concerned, I did not own that vehicle. Okay, now why don't I own the vehicle? Well, you signed the ownership. Well, I didn't sign the ownership.
Well, there were also circumstances where Mr. Earl's modus operandi was a little different. And what he would do is he would sell someone a vehicle, but that vehicle's lien, the existing lien from the original purchaser, had never been satisfied. So you buy the good in good faith, thinking that you have ownership of it and free and clear entitlement to it. And it turned out in a lot of cases, he never paid off the original finance company. So consumers were confronted in some cases with a knock on their door or a phone call from a finance company saying, I'm sorry, but this vehicle's liened and you owe us. And in some cases, the amount of money that was owed was, $70 or $80 or even more $1,000.
When Mr. Earl came to our attention that he was possibly defrauding a fair amount of people, investigation team began with search warrants for his business, production orders for bank accounts, several dozen victim statements.
The reality is that I was behind the 8 ball. Well, you phone the insurance company and you tell them that, what's transpired, and they go, oh, well, we'll send that off to the claims department, and then they came back and goes, we cover you for theft, but unfortunately this is fraud, and we don't cover you for fraud, and thank you very much.
Mr. Earl was very convincing. He was very quick on his feet with responses to questions from consumers.
30 days came and went, and Willie had heard nothing from Donald Earl or the RV dealer. Willie took the matter into court, and he sued.
I came into the court, and the judge awarded me the full amount that Mr. Earl owed me. It was, of course, a question how to get the money, and there the court told me point blank that that wouldn't be easy. That was up to myself to get the money out of him. Mr. Earl had started a business in a smaller town. My son and I then went there to confront him and serve him the papers. My son then looked around, and that's when he approached him and said to him, hello, Mr. Earl, how are you? and who are you? And then my son just said, here you are, these are the papers that are served upon you to come to court. And Mr. Earl then took the envelope with the papers, and he just ripped it and threw it on the ground with quite an attitude. No remorse, for sure. And that was when I realized I might as well forget the whole sorry story. Being a retired person on a fixed income, $10,000 does hurt.
We were able to arrest him in September of 2005. On the 19th day of September 2005, it was a trial date for Mr. Earl. And we had very credible, very honest victims that I think at the end of the day, when Mr. Earl saw everything piled against him, he pled guilty to 85 charges of fraud over $5,000 and 9 counts of fraud under $5,000. Mr. Earl received 3 years in a federal penitentiary and a restitution order of $2.6 million to the victims.
I think Mr. Earl was driven by greed. I think Mr. Earl did not have a conscience.
Somebody does something to you, and you can either sit back and say, lesson learned, or fight back.
Make sure you run a used vehicle information package so that you can verify whether or not there are liens outstanding on the vehicle you intend to purchase. And make sure that if you did leave it there and the dealer is going to satisfy an existing lien, that they can provide you with proof that they actually have satisfied the lien. And certainly not leaving signed ownerships or powers of attorney that give anybody the right to transfer vehicles out of your name is very ill-advised.
Fraud is rivaling the drug trade right now, and the losses each year to victims all over the world is staggering.
If you place your mobile home up for sale at a dealer, how can you ensure that it hasn't been driven or rented without your knowledge? A, check the odometer. B, ask the dealer. C, measure the tread on the tires. Or D, install a GPS to track trips. If you place your mobile home up for sale at a dealer, how can you ensure that it hasn't been driven or rented without your knowledge? The correct answer is A. Although all of these suggestions are good advice, the best answer is to record the odometer readings when you deliver the vehicle to the dealership.
1 out of every 5 salvaged vehicles this has happened to.
Saturday night, coming home on a 2-lane country road, and unfortunately his friend fell asleep at the wheel, and Bobby took the impact of the other car that hit them. Bobby died immediately. When the police did their investigation, they told me that the airbags had been stuffed with paper.
I think the profit and the greed overcomes any other human compassion that they may or may not have. People have been killed or maimed as a result of this type of fraud.
It shocked me to find out that this is absolutely a common practice, that people do this every day, that they don't even think twice about it.
Our son Bobby was a very active 18-year-old. Grew up in a rural community outside of San Diego. He had a lot of enthusiasm for everything he did, and he loved to fish. And he had a very good friend who he'd known for almost all out through school. His parents bought a truck for him.
Arnold Parra owned a body shop, and he would just fix vehicles, but as a side business, he decided that he would go to these auction places and buy salvaged vehicles and fix them up and sell them.
My husband and I went out that evening, that Saturday evening, and we thought Bobby was going to be staying home. And we told him, okay, be good, you know, and don't have too many friends over. And when we got home, his car was there, but he was gone. He was out with his friend Waylon at some friend's house in another rural community.
We gotta make sure we bring some of their spices up, because now I know how to barbecue.
Coming home on a 2-lane country road. And unfortunately, his friend fell asleep at the wheel. Bobby took the impact of the other car that hit them. I understood that Bobby died immediately. When the police did their investigation and I talked to his friend's parents, they told me that the airbags had been stuffed with paper.
When Mary came to me and told me about what happened to Bobby and that there was basically garbage stuffed into the airbag compartment, my heart just sank. I just felt that this was absolutely wrong. Arnold Parra, the one who owned the body shop, told Bob Blocker that, you know, he got a vehicle in mint condition, that it had not even been in a front-end accident, that it was only in a very small rear-end accident. Arnold Parra saw this vehicle. He absolutely knew the airbags had been deployed. He consciously lied to a very close friend of his about what had happened to that vehicle.
Since Bobby's accident, we've learned that this is very common in salvage vehicles.
What the criminal element would do would be take this bag, take the cover off and glue it, and then stuff it full of whatever they had at hand. Close back up, and if you didn't really look at it closely, you may not notice that it's a deployed airbag.
What's a quick way to tell if the airbag in your new-to-you used car may have been tampered with? A, check the trim over the steering column to see if it's any different from the rest of the car. B, ask the mechanic if the airbag is okay or not. C, ask the prior owner of the vehicle. Or D, wait to get into a crash and hope the airbags were replaced. The correct answer is A, check the trim. The first step in detecting an airbag fraud is a visual inspection of the car interior. If you detect imperfections in the areas where airbags are located, demand that a qualified professional check the airbag system.
A shop like this can turn out hundreds of vehicles a year where they don't replace the airbags. And that's just, if you just look at one vehicle, they may be saving $3,000. They could be making, $300,000. By telling people that there are airbags in it when there's not.
Vehicle history report can help alert you to the potential of a prior airbag deployment through accidents and service records that have been reported to us. The beauty of the Carfax system is that we gather information from 34,000 sources, so you don't have to. In this particular instance, this vehicle started its life in California and very quickly was involved in a major accident. The airbag deployed, and it was declared a salvage title or issued a salvage title by the state of California. Prior to the creation of the Carfax system, the used car purchaser in Wisconsin would have had no access to that information, wouldn't have known that that vehicle had been previously titled in California and issued a salvage title. This particular salvage title was reissued, and this car is currently being operated in Indiana.
The problem with this situation is that you do not even think about it, whether your airbags are working or not, unless you're in an accident and unless you absolutely need them. And at that point, it's usually too late.
Take you through some of the points that you need to look at and some of the easy things to spot when a fraudster has been doing his normal work and trying to deceive you, the unsuspecting car buyer. In the dashboard area where the passenger bag is, you look for any abnormalities, any creases, any tears, any obvious repairs, seams that don't look like factory. And the same goes for the driver airbag. Make sure that there's no tears, make sure that the horn works, look for any creases in the headliner. Handles, grab handles that are broken, any damage to the sun visors. If it's had a deployment, there's a lot of plastic in these cars, and a lot of the plastic gets damaged. Side airbags are usually mounted in the seats. That's the favorite place for a lot of the manufacturers. There is a seam here. I've seen people where they've sewn up the airbag deployment seam, and you can see that because it doesn't look like factory stitching.
Arnold Parra never took responsibility for this accident and what had happened to Bobby. The jury, they awarded an amount for the loss of Bobby, but they awarded $15 million in punitive damages against Arnold Parra. We got the verdict against him. We learned that he committed suicide in his shop. Only, I believe it was 18 days after the verdict.
We just go on and just hope that there will be a change and that someone doesn't have to die unnecessarily because of greed.
Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Fraud Squad. Remember, we're fighting fraud together. For more information on this and other episodes of Fraud Squad, go to investigationdiscovery.ca.
That's what I want.